this room will not win is actually not the hard work, which is what I'm going to talk about probably for the next 45 minutes. It's your lack of patience. I think there's literally 300 million different ways to win in the US. There is no blueprint. There is no exact way. It only comes down to being able to factor in the 40 or 50 indexes, input points, context points around your life, and then navigating through that. And so what I really want is for people to understand, don't do it like me, don't do it like you, don't do it like Zucks, don't do it like Trap, don't do it like Cuban. And the lack of patience is what hurts so many people.
If you decide in any particular area that you're concerned about, to make a conscious, deliberate, determined effort to read one book a month in that area, in 5 years, you'll be among the top 5.
Good morning, everybody. 1 second, let me get this down here. There you go. How's everybody doing today? I hope everybody's having a great week so far. Happy Wednesday, August 26th. It's 8:30. How's your morning going? So today we're going to jump in. We're going to do some sharpening the saw. So what I talked about a couple weeks ago is the 7 habits of highly effective people. And one of those habits is sharpen the saw, always trying to get a little bit better, always trying to learn a little bit more. And our focus now is primarily on listings. We are really focusing on listings, really trying to make sure that we can bring in more business, because we know listings last. People who list last, and you'll spend a lot less time with listings than you're going to with buyers. Buyers are going to occupy a lot of time. Buyers we have a bigger tendency to flake. You can't always build as predictable a business with buyers. So it's always best if we can focus on the listings. If you focus on nothing but listings and you are an individual agent and you're doing nothing but focusing on listings, you're going to end up getting probably 50-50 or 60-40 listings to buyers business, because the more listings you have, the more sign calls you have, the more sign calls you have, the more buyers you potentially could have. So focusing on listings is going to benefit your business. So what we're going to focus on and talk about is our listing process. We're going to really dig into the Beggins listing process and take an opportunity from start to finish. Somebody calls and says, I want to list my home. And we're going to talk about those steps going forward from there. I want to list my home. What do we do from there? So jumping in, let's share the screen. And we're going to go on this one. All right, so this is the basic starting of how do we go from start to finish with a listing process. How do we do from somebody calls me and says, I want to list my property, all the way down to we are putting a sign in the yard and we're getting a contract and managing that contract from start to finish. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this because a lot of us have a process we go through, but a lot of us wing it. I'll tell you that whenever we go through it, whenever I list a property, I do the same thing, no matter what, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, whether it's somebody I just met, a referral, it does not matter. The process is going to be the same, because I want people to I want to earn the business, number one, and I want people to refer business to me and have the best experience with me. But I want it to be because I did a damn good job. I don't want people referring me business because I'm their friend or they know me or they know I'm a hard worker. I want them referring me business because I do a damn good job getting their property sold. So how do you make sure of that? It's having a system in place that you follow every time, that it doesn't change. Number one, it's going to get you more sharp on your process if you have a system and you have a script and you have a process, the way you go through things. So that's what we're going to focus on today, going through these steps. So to begin with, this is what we're basically going to cover. We'll cover some parts. We may not get to the listing agreement today, but we're going to talk about Toolkit CMA, listing packages, previews, CMAs, SPAs and cost estimators, what to look for in a property and a listing when you're going through that. We're just going to kind of remind you of some things and get listings top of mind for you so you can start focusing on those things. We know that where your focus goes is where your energy is going to go. And whatever you focus on, we tend to create. Everything starts with a thought. And if we can fill our mind and fill our thoughts with properties, listings, and getting those opportunities, that's where our energy is going to go. And that's what we're going to have a better opportunity to create. So here's the basic Beggins listing process. It's basically a lot of P's: pre-qualification, preview, presentation. But in between them, there's going to be some other little steps. So from start to finish, whenever somebody calls me and says, I want to list my property, the first thing I do is I let them know and I tell them that, look, so I'm really excited for the opportunity. Thank you very much for letting me know that. So here's how I handle this. This is how I handle my business. So from start to finish, we're going to go through a process. I'm going to have to ask you a few questions. After I ask you a few questions, I got to come by and see your home. Once I'm able to see your home and get a really good idea of, getting my hands on it, eyes on it, see it, feel it, smell it, know exactly what it is. Once I'm able to see that, I'll be able to properly price it. Once I get my full pricing together, I'm going to come by and give you a presentation. And once we do the presentation, we're going to decide together where that price is going to be and how to position your property on the market. Does that sound good to you? Great. So then we go in and I start asking them questions. So when would be a good time for me to ask you a few questions? I have a few questions I'd like to go through and ask you. We'll get into each of these steps in more depth in the next couple slides, but that's basically how I started. I want to make sure I set the tone that this is a business for me and I take control from the get-go. I take control from the start and say, so this is how I handle my business. This is how the process is going to go from start to finish, and give them a brief outline. And then does that sound good to you? Give them the opportunity to affirm, yes, I heard that. Yes, I understand. Yes, that sounds good to me. And then ask is, when would be a good time for us to have that conversation? Can I take a few minutes of your time now to ask you a few questions? Or would you like to schedule to do that at another time? So that pre-qualification is going to be really important, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Then from there, I'm going to schedule a preview appointment, right? So I need to schedule a time to preview their home. Once I ask them the questions, I need to set a time to preview their home. Once I set that time that I'm going to go preview their home, that's on my calendar. The day of the preview, I'm going to confirm the preview. I'm going to call them and say, hey, John, Joe, this is Chris Reed, Century 21. Just wanted to confirm our appointment today at 3 o'clock and make sure that we're all good with our scheduling. I'll be by at 3 o'clock. It should only take a few minutes just to walk through the property and take a few notes. So that's just confirming that. So that's going to be our second, potentially third touch. Depends on how they called. Hey, I want to list my home. Great. We schedule a time to do some listing pre-qualification. Then we schedule a time to do the preview, but I confirm it. Now I'm going to show up for my preview. And when I show up for my preview, I'm going to bring a pre-listing package with me. So it's going to be a nice little fluff piece about me and the company and setting the tone for, I have a team. This is what we do as a brokerage to make sure we get your home sold. So now I've got 4 touches. The phone call that I want to list my property, the pre-listing, the pre-qualification questions, the confirming of a preview. Now I'm showing up for a preview and delivering a pre-listing package. At my preview, we'll go through the entire process in a little bit. I'm going to set a time for a presentation. When would be a good time? I'm going to go back and do all my pricing. When would be a good time to set that time frame for us to do a full presentation? So we set that time. The day of the presentation, I'm going to confirm the presentation and then show up for the presentation. So potentially I have 5 to 7 contacts with this person through our listing process. But if you have these steps down and you follow these steps in order, there's a reason that we put them this way. There's a reason that we go through these processes to make sure that you are in the best position possible when you show up for pricing. What's the difference between doing this and the guy who answers the phone and says, hey, I understand you want to list your home. When's a good time for me to come by? I'll bring by a CMA. I'll show you where your pricing and the numbers are at, and we'll take the next step from there. And then they show up and they show them that their home is worth X, Y, whatever it is, whether it's less, whether it's more, whether they're telling them about the color of the property, the things they have to do to the home to get it ready, putting them through a lot of stress. And the biggest problem is they have no rapport. They have no rapport, number one, but they also have no value factor in them. They haven't set a tone that this is the business for me. This is how I do the process. You didn't take control and put yourself in that position, and you didn't earn their trust. You didn't build the rapport with them to get them to like you, know you, and trust you. So there's a problem with doing it that way, which is why when you do this and you have 5 to 7 contacts with somebody before that, we have 5 to 7 opportunities, at least one of them doing a preview in person, where you can build rapport with them and connect with them a little bit more. The better I can connect with them, the more I use my sales skills, the more I use DISC and the VAK, and I understand what type of person this is, how they communicate, the way that they're talking. The more I can do that, the better I can build trust with them. So when I come in and I tell them that you need to paint the purple room, your house smells like dog pee, your home is worth $20,000 less than you thought it was going to be. Once we get through all of that, they may not like what I said, but they damn well trust me because I have a system, a process. We built the rapport. They know that I know what I'm doing, and we built that along the way. So that's the point in doing all of these things, to build that trust, to set this precedence for how your business is handled, how you can do that. So jumping in, this is before your preview, your listing pre-qualification questions. So these are a series of questions built for you to get some things out of the way, number one, but to understand, and here's your opportunity to build rapport. The listing pre-qual and the script that we have sets a precedence. And then when you're asking these questions, which a lot of them are right up here, it's pretty much asking them things and then giving you the opportunity to listen and repeat and affirm, which sets that tone of, I heard you, and you can trust me because I'm repeating it back to you and you're understanding that I'm listening to you. So you're setting a tone there. So asking questions, so where are you moving to? How soon do you have to be there? Are those important questions to have? Absolutely. Those are important questions that you need to understand. Even if they've already told you that, then you're going to just reframe that and say, so you told me that you're moving to, and you said you'd like to be there by, is that correct? Take this opportunity to repeat and affirm. Then, has there been any improvements to the property? What have you done to the property in your time of ownership? How would you rate your home on a scale of 1 to 10? I think that's a great question to ask. When I'm asking this question and they say it's a 10, I'm writing all this down. I'm taking all of these notes. So when I go and do a preview and I walk into the house and they've told me that they think their house is a 10 and it's far from a 10, we know what we're up against. I know I have to earn more of their trust, because the things that are going to come out down the road in the next appointment on our presentation are going to be a little bit more of a challenge. So I have to figure out, how can I earn their trust? How can I connect with them even more? How can I instill myself into their life and become part of their life so that they trust me and they know when I'm saying what they need to do, that they understand that it's something that has to happen and I'm not badgering them, beating them down. They don't have to get defensive about it. So how would you rate your home on a scale of 1 to 10? We're just getting an idea of how they feel about that. What would make it a 10? So this is where they start telling you all of the projects that they started and didn't finish, all of the things that they got into that never got done, all of the things where something leaked and they didn't fix that, or this doesn't work quite right, or my kids ended up spilling something on the carpet upstairs. There's a chair over top of it though. So we put a rug down to cover that part up. They'll start telling you some of those things. This is where we're taking notes and we're starting to understand that. What do you feel the approximate value of your home is? I think this is a very important question. It's going to set a precedence for reality versus fantasy land when we get down to the pricing and we get down to our presentation. And will your plans change if you can't sell this home? What's this? Gathers motivation. So let's see what their motivation is. If they're saying, no, I absolutely have to sell, so I really need this number, but if I don't get that, I really don't have an option, but I need to maximize what I get out of this. They're going to start telling you what their motivation is. No, I'm not going anywhere if I don't get X for it. So we know where they stand. And do you plan on holding any owner financing? Have you planned to sell the home on your own? All of those are on our listing pre-qualification. And these are all done before the preview. Take really diligent notes of these, repeat and affirm, and take the opportunity to repeat them when you're in a preview, whenever that opportunity comes up, so they understand that you listened and you paid attention to everything that they were saying. So listing pre-qualification, you're gathering their motivation. You're getting an opportunity to earn their trust by listening, repeating, and affirming. And we're really going through a list of baselines and getting them to talk so we can understand a little bit more of their DISC and their VAK. They're going to start using specific words and talking in a specific way that gets us to start understanding that. That's where the real power is in this listing pre-qualification. It's the opportunity to connect with them. So then what I'm typically doing after I do my pre-qual is I'm doing a little bit of research on the property. So when I'm doing research on a property, I'm not looking at price. I really don't care what the price is. I don't want anything that I see in pricing on Zillow or anything to really sway my decision when I sit down and look at the actual numbers to do pricing. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing research. I'm looking at all of the different websites that are out there, and I'm looking at every link through MLS that I can find to go to public record, to go into look at permits, to look at the taxes, to look at who owns the property. So there's some really important things that we have to look and we have to find. So when we're looking at things like Realist, I use Realist primarily. Realist is a very user-friendly interface. It's very easy to see and use. So I'm going to jump into Realist really quick and just show you some of the things that we'll be looking for in there. So everybody has a link to Realist in your matrix. Up on the top there under tax, there's Realist, IMAP, public records. I'll go to Realist. Look up my property just because it'll be easy. And find your property, click on the reports. The reports is going to open this reports page. This is a grouping of all of the public record information. Realist goes and tries to grab all public record information for you. Up top, this is going to tell me who owns the property. It's important to know. So if I'm talking to John Smith and I see up here that John Smith has Mary Smith on here, I know that there's a husband and wife, or there's another party, there's a sister, brother, sister. You can see if it's vested as husband and wife, or if it's a family member of some kind. I know that I got to look for more information. I know I have to ask, part of the listing pre-qualification or part of our confirming a previews, will all parties be at our meeting for our presentation when we show up? So knowing if all decision makers are going to be there to make sure that everybody's there to sign. So this is an important section up here, making sure that we know who owns the property. And if this doesn't match, we can go into the property appraiser records, which update regularly as well. This should pull from there, but it doesn't always. Then we're looking at, do that all the time. There you go. Yeah, Lauren, we'll get into that one. That'll be down a little bit further on this list. All right, so back in here. So in here, location information. This is just real basic stuff. The main thing I'm looking here at is flood zone. Is this property in a flood zone? Just kind of knowing what kind of disclosures we're going to have to make. Also asking, do you pay flood insurance? So not everybody who's in a flood zone pays flood insurance. Their property may be in a flood zone, but they may not pay flood insurance because the home on the land is not in a flood zone, just a portion of the land is. So understanding that. Tax information, this is a link to the property appraiser, so you can always go directly to the property appraiser website. The taxable value, seeing how in line that is with what other taxable values that are there. Then looking at the taxes, so these are preliminary for 2020. kind of checking this information out. Here's the information about the home. This is going to be imperative. So I look at this, you can see it says living square footage here, total building. Sometimes this will say tax. See how you hover over it? It says tax and MLS. This is going to show me any discrepancies that may have happened. We all know that people have made mistakes. There's some websites that have the square footage wrong. The property appraiser has had square footage incorrect plenty of times before. And this could be a first indicator that there might be an issue. If I see the tax showed 2,900, but MLS showed 3,200, I'm going to know there might be an issue. I'm going to start looking in. I'm going to do some research on other homes in the area that are the same floor plan, figuring out, do those homes have the same square footage as this? And what are those recorded as? Are those recorded as the larger square footage or the smaller square footage? Looking up the builder, asking them if they have the builder information for the floor plan to show the square footage. It doesn't always mean that that's the square footage that they have. Asking them if they have a previous appraisal from when they bought the property. The appraiser should have measured the home, and whatever the appraiser measured it at will be probably a better indicator of the square footage than the tax assessors, the property appraiser's assessment sometimes. So noting these issues. Also, same thing, bedrooms, bathrooms. This says tax says 5 bedrooms, MLS says 4. Why would that be? Did somebody enclose a room? Did somebody put up a door? Did somebody do something different there? I'm doing my research here so that I can identify when I go to the property what it is. I can identify how the seller is confirming the information. Is it 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms? Which one is he saying? So we know how that's going to be marketed. You best believe if he's saying it's a 5-bedroom property, taxes are saying it's a 5-bedroom property, but inside the home, it's 4 bedrooms with a den or some type of loft that has a doorway, and he says 5 bedrooms. That's possible where we need to have a conversation. We need to make sure we understand how we can market that property. Also looking at the age of the home so that I can determine what issues might there be with the property. Is the roof going to be an issue? Air conditioning, water heater, exterior paint, stucco, those kind of things. Is there going to be any issues with those things there? This tells you the features. Is there a pool? Is there a shed? Are there other things that are on the property that we need to be aware of? Building description, what they've done. Has there been enclosed? There's open porches, there's enclosed porches. Is there a finished garage? Is there no garage? Sell scores talk about the information there. Estimated value, not really concerned with that right now. Previous listing information. I always use this and go look at the previous listing, see what the photos are like, see what the previous write-up said about different things that have been done to the property. So I want to know what's been done to the property before, what's been done since their ownership, see how different things are. Just again, gathering information. This is my information gathering stage. Previous sales. I can also look here. This is when the last deeds were recorded, the time frames in between the recording of the deeds, and then looking at the previous history. I can tell what they paid for the home and what kind of mortgage they got for it, how long ago. And if they got a mortgage for that property and I'm seeing that when we get to the numbers, hey, their mortgage was $375, but it's probably only going to be selling for $375. We may have some conversations to be had. Also foreclosure history, always looking here to know, is there any lis pendens? Has the property been foreclosed? Is the property, are they missing payments? Are they in arrears with payments? So this is going to tell us some information there as well, and a basic property line map to see how that looks. The relist, again, very user friendly. You can scroll right through and go through all of that information. I use that primarily. I do look on Zillow. I do look on Realtor.com. I look on IMAP because IMAP has a cool feature where you can find the flood zone and a flood map. So also Realist looks like they added it as well. So there's a flood map here, and you can see it said AE. This looks like the entire property is going to be in a flood zone. The only thing I don't like about the one on Realist is you can't zoom in and out. And on IMAP, you can zoom in and out so you can see surrounding areas and what might be an issue and what might not be. So that's what I'm doing for research when I'm looking through all of the information here. I'll go back. So Realist and IMAP are a good source of information. NAR, RPR, so we all have a link through MLS. When you log into your MLS and this main page right here, we've got RPR right there. That's another resource. I know if I have a C personality, RPR has a ton of information, a ton of neighborhood information, school information, demographics, breakdowns, sales percentages, prices, all kinds of information in there. I know if I have a C personality, I'm going to use an RPR report for them and give them that to just to kind of quell over and just look at that and consume some information, because that's what they want to see. I'm looking at Zillow. I'm looking there just to see what Zillow is saying. I will look at what the Zestimate is, just to have it in the back of my mind. I do print the Zestimate out a lot of times and bring it on the presentation just so I have some other things to point out to them. Next is going to be permit lookup. So I do a lot of research with the permits. Now, this is a way that you can get out ahead of it. These are all the counties that we primarily serve: Hillsborough, Pinellas, Manatee, Sarasota. Velocity Hall is a really cool resource. Velocity Hall does Hillsborough and Pinellas County. You literally just go to Velocity Hall, type in, use the down arrow, the drop down to do Florida, and then Hillsborough, Pinellas, type in the address. When you pull the address up, it's going to tell you if there's open permits, expired permits. So Florida, let's go to Hillsborough County. Same thing, you're going to come down here to check research permits by the address, 5306. So it's going to pull this up. And why am I doing this up front? Well, I'm doing it up front because I want to know, they told me in my listing pre-qualification questions that they replaced the AC, they have a brand new roof, they completely remodeled the kitchen, they added a pool, they extended their driveway, they replaced all the windows, they added a new front door, whatever those things are. A lot of those require permits. So if I'm seeing and we're marketing that these issues or these things have been updated and done, and I don't see a permit for it, then we're going to have to make sure that we have a discussion. The seller's property disclosure asks about unpermitted work. And it says, has there been any unpermitted work done? And if we know there's unpermitted work done, we have to disclose that they replaced all the windows and didn't pull a permit. The roof was done, there was no permit. So there might be some issues there. The next slide will get into just kind of deciphering those terminologies so you know what to look for. So going through these sites, Manatee County, this is a permitting site through Manatee and Sarasota. These may have updated because they have updated through different services, but this was as of recently. Tax records, going to hillstax.org, to pinellas.taxcollector.com, taxcollector.com for Manatee County, going to these different sites and looking at the tax bill. I want to know, is there a homestead exemption? Looking down in the bottom, important information when we're looking at their tax bill. If I'm going to go and list a property, we've seen a lot of potential issues with PACE loans and PACE disclosures. So when we're looking at their tax bill, oh, really quick, while I got you here. This is my property that I purchased this year. This is why you have to use multiple sites sometimes. This is still showing as owned by the previous owner. So Barry Kingard still shows as owning this property in the tax records. Why is that? Well, I bought the property at the end of January. Hillsborough County taxes and Florida taxes get paid at the end of the year. So this tax bill will not be updated till the end of the year when the new tax bill comes out. That's when it will reflect any ownership changes that happened this year. They don't update the record as a sale happens in the tax records. These are showing what 2019 taxes were. When 2020 comes out, it'll show what 2020 taxes were, but that's not until October, November. So if you're relying on Hillsborough County tax records or any Florida tax record to show ownership, it's not. It's going to show who the owner was the previous year unless this year's taxes have already come out. That's why you go to the property appraiser site. The property appraiser site updates as records get filed. So as a deed gets recorded, the property appraiser site will update to new ownership. And if somebody bought a home just recently, let's just say you work with an investor who bought a home through a certificate of title or through some other avenue that way and is selling it right away, you may not have a tax record that shows he owns the home yet because it hasn't been updated. In case you recognize in a lot of your closings, we're signing COVID disclosures that state that recordings are taking a while and taking time to process. So it may still show you own this home for 30 or 60 days, sometimes longer, because the records haven't been updated yet because people are behind. So if you have an investor that bought a home, you may need to have him provide you with that certificate of title, that directive from the court that says that he owns the property. So just keep those things in mind. That's why you may have to use multiple sites. The tax collector's office doesn't always show the exact owner if there was a sale earlier that year. So keep that in mind. Then when we're looking at the tax records, I'm looking, was there an exemption? Is there an exemption? Then looking down here in this non-ad valorem assessments, this is where you're going to see the PACE loans. This is where you're going to see some of the other the clean energy type loans that they put on there for people replacing roofs, windows, ACs, and doing that and taking a loan out. You'll see an amount here that's been added for what they pay each year. So paying attention to these things. The CDD, I've had plenty of sellers say that they didn't have a CDD. It's right there on their tax bill. They had a CDD. So knowing all of that information, and if you asking questions in the pre-listing qualifications questions there, if you're asking those, some of these things might come up. You do your research, pull it, make sure that you have it. When you go to the preview, don't say a word about any of that yet. You're just building rapport, earning trust. Then bring all of it up at the presentation once you get them to earn, once you've earned their trust, so you know what they want to do with the property. Okay, so using all of these resources, I do go to all of them and do a lot of this research. We'll get into the MLS and the SPA and the cost estimator. We're not messing around with that right now. We're just doing some research on the property, understanding what's going on with it, who owns it, what's the history of it, are there any open permits, what's the tax collector say, is it a flood zone, did they say they did a lot of work and we don't see permits? That's what we're looking for. Next, talking about the permits. I know I said we'll talk a little bit more about this. So during your pre-listing qualification, your pre-qualification, you're asking them some questions. I'm asking them if they've ever done it, if they've done any updates to the property. They're going to be telling me about updates that they've done. I'm going to be making notes to it, and I'm going to ask them for some, when we do the presentation and we get everything signed, I'm going to ask them for some receipts, some invoices, and some documentation of the work that was done. If they have all of that, that's great. If they don't, that could potentially create an issue if there are no permits for it. So then if we're having a permit issue, there's different types of filings for permits. When we're looking at the information here, notice you'll see final, cancel. There's also a status of open, issued, and expired. So those are things that you want to know about. You can always call the building department and ask some questions. They're backed up right now. You probably won't get a lot of response out of them, but knowing what an expired permit is. Well, first of all, when you're looking at an issued permit, that's somebody filed a record to do work and they've issued the permit. Then it becomes an open permit. So when it's open, issued and open, it means that somebody filed for the work, they issued the permit. Now the permit has been opened and the work should be done. During a period of time, it will stay open until they have a final inspection from the county. The county building inspector will come out and do a final inspection. When he does his final inspection, he's supposed to take his paperwork back, file everything into the permits the way it should be, and then mark it as final, meaning that it's been closed and canceled or closed and done. That means that the work has been verified as being completed. If you click on any of these, you can see what it is. You can look up status. You can see who's done it. When was it assigned? What's the status? You can look at all of this information and check into it. Look at when the inspections are approved. You can take a look there and see if there's any issues or anything that has come up. So you can look through those just to get a general idea. That way you have something to talk with the building inspector about if you're calling them. So how do you remedy some of these issues? So number one, if you have work that's been done that doesn't have a permit, I'm always asking for invoices or receipts showing that it was done. If there is an expired permit, the expired permit was a permit that was opened, the work was completed, and it either never got inspected by the county inspector, which means it will never get closed out, or it got inspected by the inspector and somehow it never got closed out. We've seen some of those before. People make mistakes. So if we have an expired permit or an open permit, then that's going to tell me that it was never inspected by the county inspector. So if we have invoices and receipts and the company that did the work is still in business, let's go at the company that did the work. It's their permit. That permit is attached to their license. Their license is responsible for the work that was done in the permit that was pulled. So if the contractor's in business, then we're going to call that contractor, ask the seller to call the contractor, tell them there's a permit still open, and they're responsible for closing it out. That's part of their responsibilities of their license. Now they should and will close that out. Now the bigger problem comes in where if this builder is not in business. We've all seen roofs that have been done 10 years ago by a roofing contractor is no longer in business. And if that happens, well, we have a couple different options. Number one, we don't have an invoice. Let's just say we don't have an invoice. We don't know who did the work. Like I showed you on the permit, we'll start off with this first. The permit shows who the contractor was. So here, James Staton was the contractor who did this pool. Eric Heck was the contractor who did the electric for the pool. So I would go and Google James Staton Jr. pool or pool contractor, or I would go to sunbiz.org and Google and search for James Staton pool contractor, or search his name, James Staton, to try and find anybody by that name and see if they have a business or a phone number in there. Because if they're in business, it's going to show their contact information. Then I'm going to call them and I'm going to call and say, hey, I have a client that's selling a property and we still have an open permit from work that you had done back in whenever. And they're expecting that to be closed out. When can you help me out? They're going to be very put off and they may not be willing to help right off the bat, but they eventually will because they have a responsibility to do so. The bigger issue comes in when the contractor is not in business anymore. When the contractor is not in business anymore, what we can do is we can contact an engineer, and an engineer will have to come out and verify that the work was done to the code of when it was completed. So if you had a 2010 roof, they're going to come out and verify the roof was put into the code that was in 2010 and everything is satisfactory. They'll put a full report together and then they will submit that to the county building inspector for review, who will then close it out as long as everything is satisfactory to that code. So they're going to review all of that and go through those steps for that. If it's not to code and it doesn't match, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have to do some work there. But these are all things that don't take a lot of time that you can do, that are just providing some value and additional value. You can always ask the seller to do it. I've done this plenty of times for people. I'm making some really quick calls. It doesn't take a lot. I had one where there was an expired water heater permit. And the expired water heater permit was from like 8 years ago or 7 years ago. I called the county building inspector, happened to get the actual inspector on the phone, chatted with him briefly, told him about what it was. He looked it up. He goes, hey, yeah, I've got an inspector that's going to be out there tomorrow. I'll send him by. If there's no issue, then we'll just close it out. That way you guys are all good to go. He took care of it, was done the next day. You've had other inspectors that have not been so handy and helpful. So this is just another way that you can help provide value. You're going to put some things out there. Certified Pre-Loved is going to do this kind of research, because they're going to pull some title information and do a search through title to make sure that there's not anything there. But we're going to do that up front as well and look through it. We can make sure we alleviate a problem moving forward. If your seller's not going to do anything and you have an as-is contract, or even you can always put in there, just for clarity, because there's no obligation for the seller to do anything on an as-is contract, but you can write in there and call it out. Seller will not assist in closing out any open or expired permits, to make sure that you call it out and it doesn't become an issue down the road. So just making sure we know what we're getting into. That's what the whole research side is for. Once we do all of our research, I've already set a preview time, because I did my pre-qualification questions, talked to them, set a time to come by and look at the property, did some research on the home, took a bunch of notes, have everything written down. The day of the preview, I'm going to call the seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm just calling to confirm our preview for this afternoon at 3. I just wanted to make sure we're still on for that. Does that sound good to you? Go, sure. Did you have any questions that have come up since our last conversation? No? Great. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. I go by, and I'm going to, before we go by, I'm going to print out a pre-listing package. If you don't have a pre-listing package, an up-to-date pre-listing package, let's get into Toolkit CMA, and you can create one very, very easily. So easy to do, to create one of these. 21 Online has a link to Toolkit CMA. Once it comes up, we're just going to get to the dashboard and search. All I'm going to do is come to this toolbar, type in Toolkit. Toolkit CMA pops up. It's going to take me to another site. Really quick and easy. It's not going to ask for a ton of information. You just click Create Presentation, Pre-listing Presentation. You're going to put some information in, choose the documents that you want. Let's see if we'll pull this one up. Let's see if I can pull this one up. There you go, the pre-listing presentation. Look at all the documents, and it saves everything that you do, and it'll create it really quickly. Literally everything's basically done for you. You don't have to do anything. This has nothing to do with pricing. This is just a really nice piece for you to bring and leave behind. I'm also, when I'm doing this, 2 seconds to finish this out. If you don't have one, this is the quickest and easiest way. Relentless service plan for you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Here's what we want to do for you. Here's what we're going to do to sell your home, how I'm proposing to work. You know, I'll be very apt to listen to determining value. I give you everything I got. It's just a nice piece to bring with them, to bring with you to show them. I'm also going to go through and print out every document that they're going to sign, because when I go for the preview, we're going to look through the property, but I'm going to have a copy of the listing contract and a copy of the Toolkit CMA. That's just the nice little fluff piece that has some of my reviews and everything in it that I've added, previous sales and everything, people they could call if they want to call for a referral or a recommendation. And I'm going to leave all of those out, and I'm going to bring those with them. I'm going to leave a seller's property disclosure as well. So while I'm walking through the property, what we're doing for the preview is we're going to walk through. We're going to take notice of any of the upgrades that they mentioned. We're going to start looking at anything that needs attention. We're going to start taking some notes on that. We're going to note any of the smells that are in the house. I'm always asking the seller, show me the property through your eyes. Tell me about some of the things that you've done. Go ahead, give me the grand tour. I want them telling me about everything in the property. They're going to tell you what's important to them. They're going to point out the things they're very proud of. If the wife or the husband is there, they're going to point out the things that we're really, really proud of them. The closet that has all of these built-ins and soft closed drawers and glass tile backsplashes and all of the fan fixtures that were just updated. And you better be taking notes of that, because those are things that are important to them, and they better be in your write-up, in your public write-up. Or you better make sure you have photos of these items when the photographer comes, if these are the really important things to them that they're telling you. Even if it's just one photo, even if you don't think it's something that really belongs, if it means something to them, put it in there, because it's only one photo and it's not going to do anything to hurt the listing. So noting all of those things, noting things that I mentioned that we talked about, we saw in the permit search, if we saw items that were done or needed to be done, or permits that were still open, or things that were on the permit search as being done, but he didn't mention. We're also going to start making note of items that are in the personal property section of the contract. Curtain rods, curtains, washer, dryer, water softeners, different fans and fixtures, pool equipment, different appliances that they have. Is there a wine fridge, second refrigerators? Different built-in shelving systems that are either built in or look like they're built in, asking those questions. So making notes of all of these items to make sure we don't miss anything. I don't want anything to come up where the buyer buying the home gets to closing, walks in the door, something's gone, and we didn't have the conversation with the seller that you shouldn't take that, can't take that, or we didn't disclose that. So doing our walkthrough here, letting the seller tell us about all the beautiful, awesome, amazing sights, sounds, things, the way it feels on the back porch, whatever those things are, letting them tell me all about those items. Before I leave, I'm going to be dropping off the contract. Mr. Seller here, here's a copy of everything that you're going to sign when we sit down tomorrow night. As far as contractually, here's all the contractual documents. I got a nice presentation for you that just talks a little bit about the process and how we're going to get your property sold. There's also a property disclosure in there where I'd like you to start reviewing, because we have a legal obligation to do that. And I'm going to be sending you a link to a video that I'd like you to watch before our presentation. When's a good time for the presentation? Setting that time frame then. I'll send that link to them whenever I leave. That way they can start watching it, and they have all the documents. They can start reviewing any documents, looking through them. That way nothing is sprung on them. There's no surprises. And then I give them all of that, because part of our process is going to be calling to confirm the presentation. Once we actually have the presentation set, the day of the presentation, one of the Mike Ferry steps is calling to confirm the presentation and say, I just wanted to confirm our appointment for tonight at 7 o'clock. And I just wanted to make sure that all of the decision-making parties will be at the property when I get there this evening. Is that correct? Yes. Good. Wonderful. We'll see you at 7 o'clock. And one more thing. I was just asking, when you look through all of the documents and contracts, did you have time to review them? Did you have any questions about anything on there? Was there anything that stood out to you? And they'll say yes, no. Was there anything, did you have any issues or questions about anything on there? They'll say, yes, I had questions about the property disclosure. Yes, I had questions about the commissions, or yes, I had questions about in your contract where it says this, that, or the other. And you don't have to answer them then. Just a simple response of, that's a very, very valid question. I appreciate the concern there. I'll make sure that's one of the first things that we address when we walk in the door this evening or tomorrow, whatever that time frame is. So we're setting a precedence. We're getting objections out of the way by giving them all of the documents. When we call to confirm, we're able to get some objections out of the way and be a little bit more prepared. So all of these things, I'm taking notes. I'm being very diligent doing all of this. Next. Then we get prepared for our presentation. Before our presentation, we're going to go and do our pricing. So we get back to the house, we do our SPA, strategic pricing analysis, we go through Matrix, we pull all of that information out. We have our SPA and our seller cost estimator. We put all of that information together, we go through, we confirm our presentation, we ask them if there's any questions they had about the contractual documents that we had left behind, or anything about a process that will come up when we sit down and meet this evening. No, there's not. Yes, there is. Good. Get out of the way. Did you have an opportunity to watch that video? No, you haven't. Good. Well, you know what? I'll send it to you one more time. If you can do me a favor, it'll save us a lot of time if you watch through that video before our meeting this evening. So we're going to show up and we're going to do our presentation and preparing for the market. We went through our presentation. I'm not going to go through a listing presentation, but we're going to go through and talk about just the preparation of getting through it. So getting through our cost estimator. A couple things to note on here. This might take us a little bit. Now, okay, first start off with certified pre-love homes. Make sure that once we're done with our presentation, we went through everything, we let them know that the main things that are causing cancellations in our contracts, about 20% of our contracts are canceling, that the main things that are causing these cancellations are inspections and appraisals and financing. So what we want to do is we want to prepare them for that. And we would like to offer them the opportunity to be a part of our certified pre-loved homes package that we provide. We'll have that addendum that we can show them, tell them everything that needs to happen, what they'll have to do to make sure the property is ready and prepared for a certified pre-loved home. Getting all of the objections out of the way, very, very key. Next, a couple different things that we're talking about. Noting the lowest and the highest price sales and where they stand comparably. That's part of going through the SPA. Making sure that they understand that, having them point them out. What is, tell me which was the lowest price one on there and which one was the highest, and then which one is most comparable to yours. We're automatically getting them to start directing towards that price and getting them to understand. And even if they don't agree with it, they're starting to see, because they're the ones pointing it out and picking it out. Price in relation to days on market, when we're looking at our absorption rate, which is the bottom left corner of our SPA. If you're not using a SPA, I highly recommend doing it. It's a very powerful tool, and it's very, very easy to use and very easy to read as a seller. So when we're looking at price in relation to days on market, letting them know a home priced at market price sells in market time. So the absorption rate tells us what your area, say Riverview, is doing, but then what your neighborhood compared to the rest of Riverview is doing. It's either selling slower or faster. Look at the time on market in your sold category. All of these homes sold within this time frame. Getting into some other issues that potentially come up. The cost estimator. Make sure we always let them know this is an estimate of your cost. We have the fast and the sell side, fast sale, slow sale, but this is an estimate of what you will make on the total proceeds from the sale. We don't always have what the sale date is going to be when we're doing our preparation and we're doing the presentation. So we don't know what the sale date's going to be, so we can't estimate what taxes are going to be. In Florida, you pay taxes in arrears, which means that the seller has to give the buyer a credit for the time that they've owned the property, a credit for taxes for the time they've owned it, which could mean your estimator says at your presentation, they're going to make $200,000. It could be, let's just say it's $1 million home and their taxes, let's just say their taxes are $15,000. Well, their $15,000 taxes, if you close in the month of September, they're going to be paying the buyer, let's just make it $10,000. They're giving the buyer a credit for $10,000 for the portion of time that the seller owned the property. If your estimator says they're going to make $200,000 and then the final settlement statement comes out and they're only making $190,000, they're going to have some questions. We have to be able to dictate to them what it means. Hey, if you have an escrow account, you could potentially get a refund back. Or once we get a contract, I'm going to do an estimate of what the taxes are going to be, which will reflect in this number. You may make a little bit less, but that's because the only things that are certain in life are death and taxes. Well, you have to pay your taxes. It's September. You haven't paid them yet. You're going to have to give the buyer a credit for them. So just knowing that once we get a sale and a sale date, I'll be able to put that in there and that number will be a little bit lower. So that's something that we make sure we point out because that can become a sticking point. Why is this number a couple thousand less than what you said it was going to be? It shouldn't be that far off. You're right. It shouldn't be. We didn't account for taxes. Appraisals, just talking about that. If we know we're pushing the price up to a little bit higher than it should be, putting that up front, explaining to them what an appraisal is, explaining to them that an appraisal is one person's opinion of the market value of the home at any given time, explaining to them that we do everything we can to meet the appraiser to get them to see things our way. But if we don't have justification because they want to list their home way too high, it might be a little more difficult, but you'll do everything you can. Explaining to them that just because an appraisal comes in lower doesn't mean you have to lower the price, but it also means the buyer doesn't have to buy the home either if it doesn't meet if it doesn't meet the terms of their loan approval. A couple of things to note too while you're doing your presentation, when you're signing contracts, if they're pricing the home too high, get them to agree to a price reduction right up front. I think this is very powerful. If we know that we're listing the home $10,000, $20,000 higher than it should be, and we want to make sure that we aren't just putting a home on the market that's not going to sell, well, this is a good way to gauge your motivation. Let's put your property, let's put it on the market. I understand you want to start here, but here's what I would like to see happen. If we do not have an offer and we do not have showings, so we do not have activity within the first 2 weeks of being on the market, with the way our market is, we missed the mark. We need to make an adjustment to the price. And what I would like to do is I'm going to put it into additional terms. After 14 days on market, if there are no offers, no showings or whatever, the seller agrees to reduce the price to or by a certain amount. Put in 1, 2, or 3 of them in there, slowly, gradually, or right away, getting them to the price that you want them to be at. Get them to agree to it up front. Number one, it calls it out. That says that you're too high. I'm letting you know it's too high. When you come to me and say, why isn't it selling? I'm going to pull out this document. I'm going to say right here, remember we signed this. We said if we didn't have this, this is what's going to happen because of this, this, and this. Putting those things in writing really gets very powerful. It creates a lot of directness there too. So we're not missing the mark with a seller and having them come back to us saying, well, what happened? What's going on? You said you would list it at this price. Yeah, but I also said that if it didn't sell, it's because of this, and we need to make sure that it sells. It just makes it very clear. No guarantees. One of the things I hear all the time, well, they told me they would sell my home. They told me they could sell. They guaranteed they'd get it sold. Stay away from those words. We don't have guarantees. We don't know what's going to change. Who could have predicted coronavirus back in March, February, March, and April, when things really kind of slowed down for us, getting right up into that April, May timeframe. Who could have predicted that? No one. So if you put a property on the market during that time, we may have experienced a slowdown. Everything could have been good and it should have sold, but it didn't because of that. We don't know what's going to happen. We have to be aware and make sure we're not making those statements. Stay away from speculating how fast. The numbers say what the numbers say. A home priced in market price sells in market time. This is where your home, if it's priced in this range, it should sell within this time. Based on the condition of your home might sell a little less. Your home might sell a little higher, whatever that is, but stay away from speculating how fast that it should sell. Let the numbers speak for themselves. Explain any potential issues. Certified pre-loved home, explaining potential issues that could potentially come up, 4-point roof, WDO, talking with them, showing them about the lock boxes in the showings. I think it's really imperative to have a conversation about the lockbox. I typically always go through a demonstration with the lockbox, showing them how it accesses, how they use the app. I always put a call before showing code, a CBS code on every lockbox so that they know there's a secondary code they'll have. That way nobody can just access it. Knowing that people are just going to show up to your door and knock or try to get into the lockbox. If you didn't know they were coming and we didn't communicate they were coming, tell them to go away, give them my card and tell them to go away and call my agent. Time frame to get it on market. How long does it take to get a home on market? Typically, we can get it on market in anywhere from 3 to 7 days. It really depends on how fast you can move, Mr. Seller, and then it also depends on weather and photography. Title company, talking with them about that. Typically, you're going to choose a title company, and they're going to reach out. They're going to ask for personal and private information, social securities, mortgage payoff, things like that. Setting that tone. And then the seller's property disclosure, making sure we review that with them. We cannot fill the form out, but we can review it with them and we can help answer any questions that they have. Lastly, we're going to talk about, once you get your property under contract, what are some of the things that you need to do once you get on the market? We have showings, we negotiated an offer, now we're under contract. These are important things to communicate with the seller to make sure they're on the same page. Communication is key here. Through the whole process, if we're not communicating with them, they're going to feel, you ever heard somebody say, I got under contract and I never heard from my agent again, or I just, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that. That's why Century 21 has that commercial where they're going and the agent goes and gets their buyer into a hot air balloon and goes, "You ever been in a hot air balloon before?" Or the hot air balloon pilot jumps out and goes, "Hey, I'll see you at the landing." And he just disappears, and they do the same thing with a real estate agent. Shows up, "Oh, congratulations, we're under contract." And the buyer goes, "Oh, great, awesome." He goes, "All right, have you ever done this before?" They say no, and he walks away and goes, "All right, I'll see you at the closing." We don't want that to happen. So making sure that we confirm all of our dates, do a critical date timeline once it's under contract, deliver it to all parties. Talk to the seller about what each date means and what you're going to be doing. We're trying to make sure we earn our money and they see our value. This is one step that will call out all of the things that we're going to be doing and paying attention to. Notify them that the title company, once chosen, is going to need all this pertinent information, and it's imperative we get it back to them quickly. Title company is going to be asking for a lot of documentation, social security numbers, addresses. Are you married? Are you not married? If you're married, are you still together? Asking questions about your where do you want the proceeds to go? I need your mortgage information, your account number in the bank that you have it with. Letting them know to expect that. Letting them know that if it's Paramount Title, it's always easy to do it through their portal. We can just get into the portal. It's all safe. You don't have to do any of the sending back and forth with email and risk anything. A couple things. Keep the home show ready through the inspection and through the appraisal. Don't start packing until we at least have the appraisal. Do not have boxes everywhere. Don't make the house a mess. Don't start taking everything down. Pack up stuff that's in dressers, behind cabinets, in closets and things like that. Put them in your garage if you want, but keep it show ready. We want to keep buyer confidence through the process with their inspection, making sure they see the same home they contracted on. We want to keep the appraiser's confidence. When he walks through that door, I want him to see a model home. In the back of his head, subconsciously, he's seeing, what do we have? When a buyer walks in, we have 8 seconds to really get their attention and determine whether they like the home or not. We have the same kind of effect on an appraiser. We have that initial 8 seconds for him to determine in his head whether this home is a dog or this home is nice and is going to be good, and he's going to start fighting for it rather than fighting against it. If he walks in the door and sees all kinds of problems, he's going to be like, oh, whoa, okay. He's going to be trying to, okay, well, how does this price justify, rather than how can I justify this price? Everything looks great here. Where is the price for the contract? As inspections, tell your seller, do not be here. Make sure you are gone. I don't want you here. I don't want you saying anything to the buyer or the inspector that could potentially be wrong. You may not use the same terminology an inspector, a buyer, or an agent might use. And when you say something, you may convey something to them that is not exactly true or isn't exactly correct and gives them the wrong idea and could create a problem down the road. Please don't be here for the inspection. Get out of here. Explain that you will be absent at times, but assure them you're always working behind the scenes in the background. And what I found is when you have these conversations and you set the precedence and set the tone up front and you let them know these things, there's less issue with it. You know, they know, and they heard, oh, well, he said there's a lot of things going on. We've got the critical date timeline that we can show them that shows all the things you're monitoring and following up with and talking with and sending them updates for the loan as they come in and title and all that. So explain to them you may seem absent, but you're really not. There's a lot going on in the background. And inform them of all the critical dates as they're completed. So as these dates come forward and get met, send them information, let them know, give them a call. Congratulations, inspections are done. At this point, the buyer does not have any more protections per that. Next thing is going to be their loan approval and the appraisal. Asking them for the survey and the owner's policy, because we have to deliver that to the buyer within 5 days. That's good to ask them about when we meet for our presentation, or, you know, when you're doing your pre-qualification or preview, ask them if they have a copy of their previous owner's policy and their survey. Contract says we will deliver to the buyer within 5 days. So we should probably be doing those things. Those attorneys will always look for something wrong. Like if they need to prove something wrong, those are little things that they look for. Well, the buyer didn't, or the seller did not deliver this, did not provide this, did not do this within this time frame. And they're little things that typically don't get met or typically don't happen a lot, but these are things that set us apart from everybody else. Then for closing, and it's about 9:30, so we'll breeze through these. Inform them of the loan approval and packing. Don't pack until you get loan approval. You don't need to pack until we get loan approval. I understand. That's why you need to be diligent about making sure your contracts have a time between loan approval and the closing date. We do not let a loan approval go up to the closing date as a seller's agent. You want at least 5 days. I'm saying you probably need 7 to 10 to make sure during that time frame your seller can verify all of his moving, get everything packed and moved up. Be sure and understand they know what stays and goes. When you're talking to them about the contract and you're going through the property, blinds, curtains, water, water heaters, water softeners, all the built-in things that are there, making sure they understand those things cannot leave. You can't swap out the faucets. You can't come and take all the hardware off and put all the hardware on it. You cannot do those things. Sellers have done it before. We had a seller take, it wasn't our seller, we had a buyer buying a home. They took every faucet out of the home, bathrooms, kitchens, everywhere, and replaced them all with crappier faucets. And they actually changed them from a bronze to a chrome. So it was very noticeable. To clean or not, obligations depend on the contract. The contract basically says all personal property and trash will be removed. So the contract itself, and without anybody adding anything, doesn't say the seller has to clean. What's the right thing to do? You should probably have it clean for the buyer. If you had a buyer, you don't want them showing up to a dirty home that they initially have to start cleaning in. So just letting them know what their obligations are, but it's the right thing to do. Asking about keys and garage door openers, that's part of the personal property. If we have them, the garage door openers will convey. Leaving items and trash. All personal property and trash will be removed from the property. The contract says it. All personal property and trash shall be removed from the property. It doesn't say cleaned, but it says trash. We've had issues where the buyer's agent literally was mad because the trash can wasn't picked up from Hillsborough County and it wasn't going to be picked up for a couple days, and there's trash in the garage. Unfortunately, it is the seller's responsibility to remove that trash, even if it's in a Hillsborough County trash container. I'm sorry, but that's what the contract says has to happen. Make sure you don't pack up your IDs, passports, or anything like that. Military IDs, drivers, make sure you don't pack those up. Make sure you don't put them in with all your moving stuff. Letting them know husband and wife both need to be there nearly all the time. So you as the husband can't pack up the truck and start driving to wherever you're moving to and let your wife go in and close, and you do it like electronically. You both need to be there, or we need to set up mobile notaries for you and do that beforehand. And there is an ongoing maintenance provision, meaning you cannot just stop mowing the lawn and let them come for a walkthrough and have the yard look horrible. You can't just cancel your pool service. You cannot just rip things off the wall and have holes all in the walls. You have to maintain the property in the condition it was when contracted and inspected. So if something breaks, it has to be fixed. If a leak happens, you have to repair it, and you have to repair the water damage that came from it. So those are things that you have to make sure we talk with the sellers about. And that is it. A couple minutes over time, but not too bad. Again, sharpening the saw. Talking about the little things that can make a difference to a seller, little things that are going to make you stand out as an agent while you're going through this process, that a lot of people are just price it, put a sign in the yard, put it on MLS, pray that it sells. That's what some people do. That is not what we do. We have a system, we have a process, we go through everything diligently. You know, we do it the right way in the beginning, and we do it the right way first. We make sure that the seller is informed, we stay in contact, we communicate. So again, Nancy, you put it right, exactly right. The more upfront you explain, the smoother the transaction. We never want to hear, if I had known this, I would have done that. Or if I had known that, I wouldn't have done this, or I would have done that differently. And the only way we get through that is by being upfront and explaining everything and having these conversations. And again, when you build the right rapport in the beginning, they trust you, they know that you know what you're doing, and they like you, and they're going to listen to you. They're going to give you some information, and they're going to work with you. It's not going to be like this with them. They're going to work with you. So communicate, 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 follow the steps. Anything that gets done more than once should have a process and a system. So just making sure that you use the listing process and system, put a process in place, write it down, have it on a sheet, and follow it to a T for your first few listings or for your next couple listings, and make a habit of that, and it'll create a change. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your week.